Story 1. The House of Whispers, Salem, Massachusetts. Amanda was a young college student looking for temporary jobs to supplement her income when she came across an ad to care for 2 cats in an old Victorian mansion in Salem, Massachusetts. The generous pay caught her attention. Without much thought, she accepted the offer, believing it would be a peaceful experience. The mansion, despite its beauty, had a gloomy aura, with ivy-covered walls and dusty windows that reflected the twilight in an unsettling way. Upon arrival, Amanda was greeted by the owners, an elegant but reserved couple. They introduced her to Shadow, a black cat with piercing eyes, and Misty, a grey cat with an almost ethereal presence. "We'll be back in 3 days," they said before leaving in a hurry, almost as if they were eager to escape the house. On the first night, Amanda explored the mansion's interior. Each room seemed to whisper stories of the past. There were old portraits of stern faces, hallways that felt longer than they actually were, and a heavy silence that lingered in the air. While feeding the cats, she heard whispers coming from upstairs. Probably the wind, she thought, trying to ignore the chill running down her spine. As she prepared for bed, she noticed Shadow standing in the middle of the room, staring fixedly at a dark corner. Amanda turned on the light, but saw nothing. Even so, the sensation of being watched was palpable. Sleep only came in the early hours of the morning, restless and filled with disturbing dreams of endless hallways and whispering voices calling her name. On the second day, Amanda found the closet doors open. She was certain she had closed them before going to bed. She decided to wedge a chair against them. In the afternoon, while reading in the living room, Misty jumped onto the windowsill and began meowing desperately at the garden. When Amanda looked, she saw a hooded figure moving through the bushes. She rushed outside to check, but there was nothing there, only the wind rustling the leaves. In the kitchen, she noticed a strange smell, like something burning. Opening the oven, she found an empty tray, but the smell persisted. The smoke seemed to form fleeting images, distorted faces that vanished as quickly as they appeared. Frightened, she decided to stay in the living room with the cats, but both Shadow and Misty avoided the area, lingering instead at the base of the stairs, staring fixedly at the upper floor. At night, Misty positioned herself at the top of the stairs, her gaze locked on the dark hallway. Her sharp meows echoed, intensifying Amanda's unease. She decided to call the owners, but the calls kept dropping. When she finally got through, they casually mentioned that the upper floor used to be the room of a relative who mysteriously disappeared decades ago. Amanda felt a chill run through her body, but chose not to press further. On the final night, Amanda was awakened by a disturbing sound. It was as if nails were scratching the hallway floor. Reluctantly, she opened her bedroom door and saw a hooded figure standing at the end of the corridor. The cats darted into the room, and the figure vanished instantly. Amanda grabbed her belongings and spent the rest of the night in her car parked a block away. The night in the car was long. Amanda tried to sleep, but every shadow in the rearview mirror seemed to move, every sound in the wind seemed to call her. She turned on the radio for distraction, but instead of music, a female voice whispered her name. She turned it off immediately, trembling with fear. When the sun finally rose, she felt a fleeting sense of relief. The next morning, the owners returned, surprised to see her so pale. When Amanda recounted what had happened, they simply smiled enigmatically. "You're brave to have stayed until the end. The other sitters quit on the first day," they said. They then revealed that the mansion had a dark history, marked by disappearances and legends about a spirit that roamed the place. Lacking the courage to hear more, Amanda bid them goodbye and left the mansion behind. But the story didn't end there. In the weeks that followed, she noticed strange things continuing to happen in her life. Lights flickered in her home. Shadows seemed to move at the edge of her vision. and the same whispers she had heard in the mansion now echoed in her dreams. Determining what was real and what was a figment of her imagination became increasingly difficult. Amanda began researching the mansion and discovered that the missing relative was a young woman named Eleanor, accused of witchcraft in the 17th century. Though she had escaped execution, Eleanor was never found. Many believed she had returned to the mansion to haunt her descendants. Amanda decided to seek help from a paranormal investigator. The investigator, a man named Henry, enthusiastically took the case. During a visit to the mansion, Henry used equipment to detect spiritual activity and recorded voices repeatedly saying Amanda's name. "You weren't chosen by chance," he said with a grave expression. With every discovery, Amanda felt the walls closing in. She sensed something was following her, something that couldn't be explained or controlled. Even so, she resolved not to let fear dominate her. The mansion, the cats, the enigmatic owners, everything seemed connected to a larger secret, one Amanda wasn't sure she wanted to uncover or forget forever. Story 2: The Reflection in the Window. São Paulo, Brazil. Karina was known for being a reliable pet sitter, capable of handling animals of all temperaments. When she received an offer to care for Thor, an imposing German shepherd, in a luxury apartment in downtown São Paulo, she saw it as the perfect opportunity to relax while working. The apartment was on the 20th floor of a modern building, offering a spectacular view of the city. Thor's owner, who would be traveling for a few days, left simple instructions: take care of the dog and enjoy the comfort of the home. On the first night, everything seemed normal. Karina walked through the apartment with Thor, admiring the elegant decor and the breathtaking view of the city lights. After dinner, she settled on the couch while Thor rested beside her. However, she noticed that he seemed restless, occasionally lifting his head and staring intently at the window. He even let out a low growl, which she ignored, attributing it to the reflection of the lights or the distant noise of traffic. On the second night, the atmosphere began to change. While walking through the living room with Thor, Karina approached the large floor-to-ceiling glass window. When she glanced at her reflection, something made her stop. Her movements weren't synchronized with the reflection. She raised her hand to test it, and the reflection hesitated for a moment before mirroring her. A chill ran down her spine. Thor, now even more agitated, began tugging at her pant leg as if trying to pull her away from the window. She tried to laugh it off, blaming exhaustion or a trick of the light, but the feeling that something was wrong lingered. Later that night, Karina was awakened by a disturbing sound. Nails scraping against the glass. The noise was sharp, continuous, and impossible to ignore. She turned on the bedside lamp and, heart-pounding, walked toward the window. As she approached, she saw deep scratches on the glass, as if something very sharp had clawed its surface. She stepped back, terrified. She was on the 20th floor. It was impossible for anyone to reach that height. Thor, on high alert, barked furiously at the window but refused to go near it, as though something invisible was keeping him away. The next morning, while taking Thor out for a walk, Karina reported the incident to the doorman. He listened in silence, his face growing pale as she spoke. After a pause, he said in a low voice, "You didn't know? The previous tenant of that apartment took his own life, jumped from that very window. They say he was troubled, but the strange thing is, other people who lived there afterward also reported strange occurrences." The revelation unsettled her further, but she tried to push the doorman's words out of her mind. On the final night, as Karina tried to relax on the couch, she again felt the sensation of being watched. When she looked at the window, what she saw made her blood run cold, the reflection of a man. He was standing on the inside of the glass with disheveled hair and sunken eyes that seemed to stare at her with pain and anger. Frozen, Karina mustered, the courage to turn and look directly at the window. However, when she did, the reflection vanished. Thor began howling desperately, and the apartment light started flickering. A piercing cold filled the room, and Karina felt something invisible touch her shoulder. That was the breaking point. She ran to the bedroom, locking herself inside, with Thor trembling with fear until dawn. As soon as daylight broke, she gathered her belongings and left the apartment in a hurry, handing the keys to the doorman without even waiting to say goodbye. Karina never returned to that building. She refused the remainder of her payment and vowed never to accept a job in high-rise apartments again. Thor, for his part, also seemed marked by the experience. Whenever he passed a mirror or window, he would growl softly as if still sensing the presence of whatever had been in that apartment. To this day, Karina wonders what she saw in that window. Was it merely the shadow of a tormented spirit? Or something more sinister, trapped between worlds and searching for a way to escape? One thing, however, she knows for sure: the reflection never lies. Story 3: The Presence in the Barn. Denver, Colorado. Ethan eagerly accepted the job, drawn by the idea of spending a few days away from the city's hustle and bustle. The rural property in Denver, Colorado, seemed peaceful at first glance, with its vast fields surrounded by rolling hills and a fresh breeze carrying the scent of freshly cut grass. The barn, however, quickly caught his attention. It was an old, weathered wooden structure that seemed to cast darker shadows than the other buildings around it. On the first night, Max, the usually obedient and calm shepherd dog, displayed unusual behavior. As they approached the barn, the dog stopped abruptly and began barking furiously, the fur along his back standing on end as though something unseen was there. Ethan tried to calm him, but Max refused to take another step forward. Thinking the dog was simply reacting to the scent of a wild animal, Ethan entered alone, but couldn't shake the chill that ran down his spine. The second night brought more unease. While Ethan was performing his daily chores of feeding the horses, he heard heavy footsteps coming from the upper level of the barn. He froze in place for a moment, the sound clearly not coming from the horses or Max, who was outside. Convinced it could be a coyote or even an intruder, he grabbed a nearby shovel and climbed the creaking stairs. The hayloft appeared empty at first glance, but a faint smell of burning lingered in the air. On the floor, he found human footprints in the accumulated dust, but there was no other sign of anyone or anything. Back on the ground level, he noticed one of the horses was visibly agitated, snorting and pawing at the ground, its wide eyes fixed on a dark corner. Determined not to let fear take over, Ethan decided to spend the third night in the barn. He set up a makeshift bed of hay and brought a flashlight, ready to get to the bottom of whatever was happening. Max, however, remained resolute, refusing to enter and instead keeping watch outside. Around 2 in the morning, Ethan woke to a disturbing sound. Low voices, as though several people were whispering at once, filling the space around him. He aimed his flashlight in every direction, but the beam seemed swallowed by the darkness. Suddenly, Max began barking fiercely outside, drawing Ethan's attention to a corner of the barn that remained shrouded in shadow. With trembling hands, he directed the flashlight toward the area. In its beam appeared a figure, the silhouette of a tall man wearing a wide-brimmed hat. His outline was faint, almost translucent. Ethan couldn't tear his eyes away as the figure stared back at him. Then, like a mirage, it vanished in the blink of an eye. When the sun finally rose, Ethan went to the property owners to recount what had happened. They listened to his story with somber expressions and hesitantly revealed a secret that seemed to weigh heavily on them. Decades ago, the barn had been the site of a deadly fire. A worker, known for being diligent but temperamental, had been trapped on the second floor when the flames consumed the structure. His body was never recovered. Since then, strange reports of voices, apparitions, and an inexplicable smell of burning had haunted the place. Ethan refused to continue working on the property. Before leaving, he glanced at Max, who was still fixated on the barn, his wide eyes filled with something that looked like fear, or perhaps recognition. Though he left the property behind, the memory of those days stayed with him, like a silent shadow. Ethan swore that on lonely nights he could still hear the footsteps and whispers echoing in his mind.